Hello, good morning, everybody, and a very warm welcome to this live webinar brought to you by The Lawyer as part of our weekly Business Leadership Summit series in association with Nuance Communications. Now, today, our aim is to offer an insight, many insights, I hope, into what makes a successful law firm in a digital age. We'll be discussing how technology can help firms improve their internal processes, build bridges and collaborations with clients, new workflows, new techniques for remaining competitive, and some of the key market trends relating to new talent. With me to discuss a range of issues related to these topics is an absolutely top-notch panel of experts, all prepped and primed, ready to share their views and, of course, answer any questions you might have. Vladimir Teodosiev, there you go, that's a good one for me to start off on, is a Senior Business Development Executive at Nuance Communications. Hi, Vladimir. Nathan Hayes, IT Director at Osborne Clarke. Kerry Westland is a Partner and Head of Innovation and Legal Technology at Adelshaw Goddard. And Jonathan Silverman is founder of Silverman Advisory and a consultant at OGR Stock Denton Solicitors. Welcome, guys. How is everybody today? You're all good?
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt.
Excellent stuff. Well, look, could you just take a minute each to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your role? Vladimir, do you want to kick off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. My name is Vladimir Teodosiev, as Matt almost correctly pronounced. And I've been working with the legal sector for almost 9 years now. My role is specializing in being able to identify the right solutions for our clients and kind of guide them on a strategic digital transformation journey by making sure that we join technology with people and process, and that our clients are properly equipped to deal with some of the changes of the marketplace.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, Vladimir. Kerry, you're next on my sort of clockwise rotation thing. So you're up.
Okay, hi everyone. So I head our innovation and legal technology team at Adelshaw Goddard, and my role is to work with all the lawyers in our business and our clients to look at how we deliver legal services in a more modern way. So looking at how you can apply technology in different ways of doing things. So quite a broad role, really.
Thanks very much. Cheers, Kerry. Jonathan.
Hi, good morning. I'm Jonathan Silverman. I'm a practicing solicitor and a legal sector management consultant focusing on firms up to 5 partners. Having set up as a sole practitioner and grown the business to a 10-partner full-service firm billing £4 million plus per annum, starting in an era when word processors were regarded as geeky, when today we've got virtual law firms who are significant players, I've seen how technology has evolved to enable agile, forward-thinking smaller firms to effectively compete and fight above their weight and gain a competitive advantage.
Thanks very much. Should have some good perspective there, I think, there, Jonathan. Thanks very much for that. And finally, Nathan.
Hi, yes, Nathan Hayes. So I'm the IT Director at Osborne Clarke. We're a full-service law firm covering 9 jurisdictions, 2,000 people. I have a particular focus on improving or transforming, depending on how you prefer to define those terms, our legal service delivery. So obviously that's very much part of a modern law firm.
Lovely stuff. Thanks, Nathan. Thanks to all of you. Now, to everybody watching, maybe at home, maybe in the office, probably at home. Before we get started, properly, I'd like to remind you once again, it is very much an interactive session. So you know the drill by now. Please do submit questions. Very easy to do. Scroll down, there's a box, ask a question, and fill it in and click it. Easy. There you go. Lastly, you can watch any of this at a later date. If you've missed some or all of it, anyone who's registered will get an email with a link to view this on demand. Okay, so let's kick off with a couple of context setting questions, and probably an obvious place to start, but the pandemic. Everybody will be familiar with that phrase that the pace of change in the legal sector is generally glacial, but this year is a year unlike any other. So what's been the impact of COVID-19 on firms' ability to leverage technology, and has it been an accelerator in terms of allowing us to work more efficiently? Nathan, would you like to kick off, and then I'd like to hear from all of the panel, please.
Sure. So absolutely, it's been an accelerator. Whilst it's obviously a terrible thing for us all to have to contend with, there certainly have been opportunities in there. The fact that obviously everybody's working largely from home, and that's been for an extended period of time, it's really had made people really reassess how they work. They've been forced to engage with technology in a way which has never really happened before. Frankly, because of that disruption, people are emotionally much more receptive to change. And so that's really opened up a window of opportunity for us to really engage with our people in a way that we haven't done before. And also just the societal changes we've seen. If you look at the drive that we've seen to engage with, obviously, the video platforms and video conferencing platforms and so on, using that as an opportunity to leverage a wider engagement with changing working practices. And so whilst perhaps counterintuitive, at this moment in time, we've actually increased our investment in technology to try and take advantage of that opportunity. And it is absolutely a closing window. As people return to some degree of normality, and once lockdown restrictions are eased, I think that those opportunities will reduce. So we're very much focusing on trying to lock in the benefits that we've seen and taking advantage of those benefits in the meantime.
Thanks, Nathan. And I'm sure we'll return to that issue of the closing window and the opportunities, but there might be a finite amount of time to take advantage of those opportunities. We'll return to that later. Just a quick note to the whole panel. If you can make sure that you are on mute when you're not speaking, because we'll pick up background noise. So if you can all make sure you're on mute, that would be great. I'm going to come to Kerry. Kerry, what's been the impact of the pandemic, and has it been an accelerator?
So I agree with Nathan in some ways that if you just think about the fact that a video call or a video conference call is generally between offices and in conference rooms rather than things like this, that's completely changed. And the ability just to quickly jump on a video call more than you would phone calls nowadays is quite interesting. And I think it's opened up people's views to using technology with almost not a lot of thinking time around it. It just had to happen on the week that we went into lockdown. And I think that's a precursor to how you then use that to do legal work. So I would say it's been an accelerator in how we use technology and how everyone gets more comfortable with it. And it's starting to feed into actually now, because I think we're going to go on to it later, now I can't print my documents, I can therefore use online tools for them. But I still think the change and the acceleration has been more around the infrastructure rather than the actual delivery tools that we have. It's coming, but I think the main focus has been communication and still talking to clients, still keeping teams together and things like that in our experience at the moment.
Great stuff. Thank you. Jonathan, let me come to you. As you said at the beginning, you've got a good perspective of how the market generally has changed over the last few years and decades indeed. What's been your perspective over the last few months?
I think it has been a wake-up call for a number of firms. I mean, I still come across firms out there running Windows 7, even occasionally XP. But I think Zoom has been the major thing. That if you ask anybody what's changed in the last 6 months, people who used to use Skype never talk about it anymore. People who never use Skype now talk about Zoom. And I think it's been that's been the major change. That's been the easiest one for people to adopt, and it's brought people to communicate in a more effective way than in the past. Also, more progressive firms who are probably using Microsoft Teams are also understanding the fact you can get people together for short meetings. It hasn't got to be a big deal, but I think that the real changes have not come through yet, and I'm sure we'll talk about those later. But at this stage, I think it's identified those firms who understand how the cloud operates. You're not going to let all your fee earners have all the documents on their PCs at home. So cloud use has increased significantly. And I think, as I said, people are beginning to recognize the fact we don't have to do things the way we've done them for the last X years.
That's a pretty fundamental change, isn't it? Potentially. Thanks, Jonathan.
Well overdue as well.
Well overdue. There's a bit of crackling on your line. I think we'll see if there's something we can do about that just to improve your line there as well. But thanks very much for that. And Vladimir, let me come to you. What have you picked up during the course of the year?
Well, absolutely a wake-up call. I think the current situation has really promoted the digital agenda a bit more, and I think, as Kerry mentioned, I think a lot of the clients have been reviewing their infrastructure and trying to really move away from centralized models and to look at redundancy options, the cloud. So these are all very, very popular types of conversations. Generally speaking, we have been absolutely very busy at Nuance. I will speaking to a lot of people, trying to help clients depending on where they are on their transformation journey. But I think it has been challenging, but I think we can all benefit from some of the changes that are happening at the moment.
Well, let's stick with you for a moment, Vladimir, because I know that Nuance has just produced a new survey, a legal survey, looking specifically at the modern legal practice. And I think that neatly flags up some of the good habits a successful law firm in a digital age needs to develop. And I guess puts some of what we're about to discuss and are discussing into context. Can you tell us what really stood out for you? What were some of the findings on that piece of research?
Yep, absolutely. Well, there are quite a lot of interesting figures, so I wouldn't want to go through everything now, but actually I just want to prompt everyone that if they would like to get a copy of the survey as well, please do get in touch and we can share that. But obviously the elephant in the room is that 80% of legal professionals went to the office before the COVID-19 pandemic, and that figure has fallen dramatically to only 21% during the pandemic, and obviously now we're in a second lockdown. As you mentioned, I think some of these changes are here to stay in the foreseeable future as well. And all this means a significant increase in virtual meetings like the one that we're having this morning, and a lot more documentation going around as face-to-face interactions are limited. Not to forget as well that we do have some political changes as well on the horizon, so potentially all this means a lot more documentation. Some things that really stood out for me is that 98% of the respondents mentioned that they use dedicated administration staff for typing services, and out of that number, 19% were doing so on a regular basis, and 79% from time to time. And the second thing that really stood out for me is that 70% of the survey respondents felt that productivity tools are a great investment with regard to staying competitive in the future.
Okay, well, there's some big numbers there. Thanks for that. What's your take on some of those findings, and also your sense of whether people's attitudes to technology in the context of the efficient running of a law firm have changed over the years? In particular, I'm thinking about workflow and lockup, turning work around, getting bills paid, obviously on time and quickly. Obviously, if you're using tech properly, you should be able to shorten that time frame. But where do you still see problems or challenges?
And I think Jonathan's point about people are self-sufficient, I think that's a material change that we've seen. And that's been, I think that's been because people have simply had to engage with the technology. And whilst we can provide them support to them remotely, it's not the same level of support that we've provided previously, both in terms of sort of PA support, but also in terms of our concierge IT service, which obviously provides an engineer at your desk. And so people have recognized that they've had to engage as individuals and be much more self-reliant. And that's it's been a great opportunity for us to work off the back of that. We've seen, I think to a point made earlier, we haven't seen the full impact of the changing working practice. And I totally agree with that, but we're absolutely starting to see that come through with much better engagement with a broader set of technologies, not just limited to video conferencing platforms and so on. And that's had knock-on benefits, both in terms of improvements in efficiency, but also more importantly, from my perspective, I have to say, which is improvements in terms of overall client service delivery.
What do you find are the best ways of actually getting your people to engage with technology? Kerry, you've got a lot of experience in that area. Are there some lessons we can learn there?
Yeah, I mean, everyone talks about engagement because it's one of the hard things, and people talk about the glacial state of change in law firms. And I think where we've seen the biggest success is where clients have driven the demand for it. And that's not 100% where the success is, but it's a big piece. So a big piece of work comes in, and actually it's work we wouldn't have been able to do before without the technology that we had and in the way that we did it. And once you get that good news story, and that's a really exciting thing, and the clients talk about it, that then goes wider and wider in the firm, and people ask to use it. So that's one aspect of it, is actually having a client that is prepared to sort of work with you and collaborate with you on something, on a particular deal. And then there's a couple of things you can do internally. One is education and engagement. So showing people what's possible, trying to get ideas from people about how it can apply, giving people time. It's a huge thing that people talk about in law firms, and obviously billable hours, but giving people time to be able to experiment and try different things. And then ultimately it comes down to mandating it. If it's a particular new tool that's come in and a new way of doing things, you take away the old way of doing it. And that's probably the hardest part of it. And if you mandate it, people do look to challenge it and look for reasons why it shouldn't be used. But ultimately, if you've made a decision as a firm that that's important and that's the way to do it, then you might mandate it and change it as well. So those are some of the different ways that we try to engage people.
That's really interesting, and I want to unpick some of that now. In the context of the pandemic and the impact of that, which I think we can spend a few minutes just exploring. Your point about the being client-led, I think, is a really interesting one there. So, is the physical location of a lawyer vital these days to the delivery of a high-quality service or not? And that's clearly has a big client nexus and impact, I guess. Kerry, do you want to pick that up, and then I'm going to come to Vladimir on that.
I mean, we've always been of the view we're quite a strong regional firm with a London offering. So location has never been a huge thing for us, in that our teams work across the different offices. When we merged with our Scottish offices, it was seamless because we've been used to working in that way and location not being important. I think where it can be important is that our relationships, they're built off client relationships. They're built off seeing people and talking to people. And I think that's probably the bit that's missing from remote working, is you can jump on a call with clients, but it's not quite the same as where it used to be. So I think location is important in actually starting that relationship off and being able to speak to them and be able to spend time with them. But when it then comes to the delivery of the work, I think that can be managed from different locations, in the office, remotely from home, or if you're abroad on holiday, maybe. So I think there's different ways you can do that.
Vladimir, what do you think?
Well, I think that consumers and clients are likely to shop around. First of all, they want to get the expert advisor they're paying for, but also in many cases they want to get it at a good price as well, which is quite important. And again, I think that can be putting some pressure for some of the clients, and it really leads back to, again, reviewing some of the services that are being provided. Are they profitable, or probably they need to focus on some aspects more. But I think we do see that for some areas of law, clients can be more sensitive to pricing as well, which leads them to kind of shop around for better options.
We've just staying with you, Vladimir. We've obviously, a lot of the changes we've seen over the last few months have been enforced, particularly working from home, and some of that is probably here to stay. What role is technology playing in helping lawyers deliver their services efficiently from home?
Yeah, a very good question, Matt. And I've got another number for you, actually, not as high as the previous ones, but 30% of the survey respondents mentioned that there is a lot of pressure for innovation within their environment. However, they also mentioned that sometimes traditional processes may stay in the way. And there might be resistance to change. And I think Kerry mentioned a very good point in terms of mandating change. And sometimes we find that having the bottom-up approach might be good as well in terms of identifying champions that can lead this transformation. And that kind of brings a bit more competition when a new service is introduced, because everyone says, well, XYZ has that service, can I have that as well? So they feel like it's more of a something that can help them, as opposed to really changing and enforcing something on them. So yes, absolutely, technology will continue to play a key role in helping delivering services efficiently. Absolutely no doubt about that. However, choosing the right technology will be even more important in the future. For instance, choosing enterprise professional grade and secure technology is absolutely key, as opposed to using freeware in some cases or consumer grade technology. And depending on where firms are on their journey, it may be a matter of reinventing existing processes and reducing the use of what we call high calorie technology, which can add a lot of pounds of inefficiency. One such example, going back to some of the numbers we spoke in terms of using transcription is quite key. And an example of this technology that can add some inefficiency is the plain vanilla digital dictation without any speech recognition, where just the file is being routed to a transcriptionist. So adding some speech recognition capability and automating some of that document production can have a really positive impact in allowing firms to produce documentation faster, providing that expert advice in a speedy manner, and ultimately being able to bill the client faster. And I think nowadays, getting the billing on time is quite critical as well, making sure that clients are paying their bills.
Yeah, well, that's always critical, isn't it? I think. Let me come back to you, Nathan. And again, coming back to the role the clients play in all of this. We're obviously all now reliant on virtual workspaces, both internally for colleagues, externally for clients. So that need for a collaborative workspace, the demand for that has gone through the roof. What's been the impact of that, and how have you responded at OC?
Sure. So we've been for quite a few years operating through our OCS banner. We've been providing collaborative workspaces to our clients, both, as I say, collaboration workspaces, but also for their own dedicated use. So we've got quite some experience of that. But what we saw through the pandemic is obviously and lockdown specifically, and having to work from home, was that people didn't have a physical place to go and convene, and so the demand for those virtual collaboration spaces went through the roof. Because you've got to remember that what we're experiencing in our firms in terms of demand for that, obviously our clients are too. They're being driven to the same sort of conclusion. So to Kerry's point, that one way of really helping transform and change the way in which we're delivering legal services is to use the client engagement. And so again, with that demand coming from the client, we've been able to take advantage of that, both respond to the demand, but also to use that to start developing different ways of working, and to also communicate. I think it was mentioned earlier, the idea of top down and bottom up. It's really important to try and attend to this in both ways, because if you do mandate, if you do take that approach, you're not going to engage a lot of people. Mandatory sort of approaches in law firms, unless there's an incredibly compelling reason, don't tend to work particularly well. So going from the bottom up, and that's really something that we've measured on here, where we're working in a very sort of evolutionary way with different areas of the business, understanding specific needs, responding very quickly, being very agile about our approach, has allowed us to engage and utilize these platforms and take these opportunities to change people's working practices. It's certainly not been entirely comprehensive across the entire business, but that's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to take people through their own journeys of changing their working practices, and it's not something you can take them from A to Z. You have to take them through the journey. They have to go through the process of understanding, the kind of barriers you face when you start changing the way in which you work, and then understanding that that needs a solution, and that the practice is to mitigate some of those negative impacts. And you simply can't get people to understand that without actually going through the experience. So that's one of the ways that we sort of responded to the situation we find ourselves in.
You said earlier, Nathan, that there's a window of opportunity to get things done, and that will close as things begin to return to normal. Can you expand on that a little bit, and perhaps also give us some tips or advice on what people can do to accelerate the adoption of projects such as collaboration or other technologies during this window of opportunity?
Sure. So I don't know if the window of opportunity will close, but you know what, I'm not going to risk assuming it won't. So I am working on the basis it will, and we've already started to see that. Once we went into lockdown, we saw a significant reduction in printing. It dropped by 95%, and as we started to give access to the office to a very limited degree, we saw that obviously creep back up. So that's, we're predicating our assumption that this window will close on the basis that was just one example of seeing how things start to revert to some kind of normality. So we do work on that basis, and therefore it's about a couple of things. One is being very fleet of foot. We're very much taking an agile approach rather than waterfall approach to projects to try and lock in some of the benefits early. So if the window does close, we haven't lost that opportunity. But also investment, and that's very tricky to do. We've been trying to be very prudent about our financials, as I'm sure everybody has been during this process. But what we have chosen to do, we've achieved some savings through good financial management, and we've chosen to reinvest those savings in the business rather than to do anything else with them. So again, it's about investment. If we don't invest now and quickly, and how you go about that is quite difficult. I'm not suggesting there's any magic wand you can wave here. Because getting the right resources, that's quite difficult. It does take time to get hold of them. But we've just got to find a way of taking advantage of this situation. Because if we don't, my expectation is that, sort of within the first 2 months next year, the opportunity will largely have gone.
It's a really interesting point about investment. Kerry, is it your sense that what's happened this year has pushed up the agenda, the investment case for various technologies within the sector and within law firms generally?
I think, and I'm obviously speaking for law firms of my size and Osborne Clarke's size, and I think that it probably hasn't pushed it up the agenda. We were doing it anyway, and Nathan talked about that in a similar way. We've been talking to clients about collaboration and working like this for a while. I think what it has done is push it up clients' agenda and in-house teams themselves. I think that when everyone had to go home in March, actually a lot of our in-house teams really struggled because they didn't have some of the infrastructure and things we had. So one of the things that was quite successful for us over the summer was the introduction of a legal front door for some clients to use. So nothing to do with the work we were doing internally at AG, but was for clients to track what was happening within their in-house teams, because you can imagine the explosion of matters that they had to deal with. They were struggling with how to manage that, how to communicate across the in-house teams. So I think it's probably not pushed it up our agenda because we have a dedicated team, a dedicated investment pot looking at technology, but definitely for clients themselves, it's pushed it up their agenda.
Yeah, certainly we've done lots of similar events like this and roundtables and so on with GCs, and that's the sense that we've had over the last few months. It had a remarkable impact on a lot of those in-house teams, and some of those teams are very small, aren't they? Sometimes it's a team of one, so it's very difficult. You mentioned printing earlier, actually, Kerry. Can I just come back to that? I think when it comes to partners, printing is actually a very emotional issue, and printers and their PAs generally are their two most emotive issues. Just take printing. What issues are raised by printing at home, and what's been the what's your sort of outlook and your thoughts now, 7 months into this pandemic?
I mean, so obviously printing in the office is all connected really easily. And I think with all the different systems and networks that we have, that can be quite difficult, and actually can be lots and lots of pages of print. And I mean, you can also see it in the office very much. And a large number of our lawyers like to get the piece of paper on their desk and get their red pen out and start with it. But actually what we've seen is, even if it's not typing themselves into the documents because of the thinking that they have to do, but using, I've got it in front of me, but using iPads and their pens to mark up documents in that way, as well as obviously track changes and stuff that you would normally do on Word. And it's been quite interesting for us. So one of the things, wasn't planning on talking about this today, but one of the things we've launched really recently is our new DD platform. And actually, when we were going, it's been a long development, and when we were going through it, the hardest bit to get around was that final piece where the first draft of the DD report comes off and people wanted to amend it and make changes. But what that meant is you were losing almost the continuation of the data in the platform, because once you print it off, it disconnects it from all of the data you've captured to do it. So we had to come up with workarounds.
Is that, would you echo that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm all for the paperless agenda anyway, and being able to digitally distribute and sign documents. But obviously there are cases where printing things would still be quite important. But again, I think it's really, as Nathan mentioned, it really is a good time to get things done, to evaluate how things are done, and not to be afraid of reevaluating processes. And that's why some of these events that we are attending, and obviously today, it's quite useful as well to speak to other people, how they've done things and how they fix their problems. That can be absolutely beneficial in sharing that information. And I do believe that ultimately everyone benefits from this.
Thanks for that. Just to flag up to everybody watching, and there are hundreds of you, you'll be glad to know, that we're having lots of questions coming in. But do feel free to submit your questions. Don't hold back. But we have lots of questions, which is generally a very good indication of an interesting topic, and discussion, which I think we're certainly having. I want to stick with the clients and collaboration, because collaboration is such a almost totemic word now. As we've already discussed, we know in-house teams are desperate to be more efficient, and in some cases, particularly when it comes to collaboration, clients say they want something different, but they're not always sure what. I'm wondering how firms can help with this. Jonathan, how's your connection going now? I see you've killed the camera, so let's have a go. But what's your perspective on that?
Can you hear me clearly now?
Sounds very good. Yeah, sounds very good.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. That's because I switched machines. So much for technology.
So Jonathan, do you have a thought on collaboration and with clients in particular, and how firms can help in that respect? I'm not sure Jonathan is hearing me. Nathan, I'm going to come to you on that one, if I may.
Sure. Yeah. So it's we're absolutely sitting down with our clients, understanding the way in which they're operating, the problems they're facing, and looking at the processes that flow between our business and theirs, and then saying, well, how can we attend to that? How can we improve that process? I think one of the questions that's popped up was around client matter inception. So, for instance, that's one of the areas that we've been working with some of our clients on, which is allowing them to, in effect, start their client matter inception process and kick off the process of opening a matter, so that they can actually, provide us with all the information that's required via an online platform, and that simply integrates directly with our own internal CMI system. So it's really just sitting down and talking to the client to understand what are the pain points in terms of the way in which our businesses are operating. So another example, we're working with a very large client where we've actually looked at our systems across both organizations and actually come up with a data architecture to show the way in which the data transitions between their systems and our own. And then started to use business analysts to understand how we can improve those processes. But obviously that's a client that we've been working with for a few years now, and it's very, very mature. But you have to accept that different clients are going to be coming at this from a very different perspective. As you say, we've got some of our clients who have hundreds of lawyers in their in-house team, and others that are just one person band. So we've got to be really conscious of that understanding. So there's no one size fits all here at all. We've got to go and have that engagement, have that discussion, understand what the requirement is, and how we can, what the opportunities are around particular improvement. And yes, we can productize, and we can come up with some standard products that we can bring to those discussions. And that sort of chicken and egg discussion, really, because you can only understand what products you've got to produce by talking to the client. And equally, half the time the client doesn't understand what they want. So it's really about that communication, that discussion, which over time you can evolve into a product suite to facilitate that collaboration.
Kerry, you're nodding away there. I'm assuming in agreement with Nathan.
If you asked me the same question, I probably would have answered it in the same way, including the chicken and egg piece, because I think clients very much ask us, what are you doing around innovation? And you might show them a fully formed product, but actually it's not client shaped. It's not, and as much as you would have had conversations with 5 clients, for that particular client, there are particular things that would have worked for them. And they're like, oh, I'd wish you'd come just that little bit earlier when you were doing it. And it's getting that balance right between not just sitting there saying, what do you want? But actually, these are some of the things we've done before. How do you think we could knit them together to create something that's particular for that client? So from a collaboration point of view, that's where it works the best.
AI and automation, how are you seeing a greater use of automation as a result of the pandemic, and the ways that we're having to work? Do you think pandemic will accelerate the use of AI or not?
Absolutely. Well, when it comes to AI, I have this saying that it's artificial intelligence. Is it really artificial? I don't think so, because it kind of exists nowadays and it's being implemented. And the question is how intelligent it is in some cases. So it's a bit of a cliche and a buzzword, but absolutely, I think automation is absolutely critical. We are getting into kind of a new kind of industrial revolution, and I think many of the things will be automated. Again, going back to some of the things that we spoke about before, the reliance of centralized teams, and do they have the right infrastructure to deliver that work? And in some cases, obviously, if servers were in a physical location, can you reach them? Or sometimes people obviously weren't available as well. So having the right sort of infrastructure is absolutely critical, but also having the right sort of automation is critical. And I think that kind of links into the next piece as well, in terms of attracting talent as well, because what we see is that through automation, firms can actually free up resource and to reduce these mundane tasks of simply typing a client memo or an attendance note, and getting people to do more skilled work. And I always say that all these changes we see in the consumer world are also affecting us in our professional lives. And when you order something online, you want to know when you're going to get that product delivered. And the same with legal services. For each client, their case is the most important case. They want to have real-time updates. They want to know what's going on. And only through automation can firms provide more resource to provide this service, and it will be absolutely critical. Yes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Can I bring you in there? Do you echo Vladimir's point about automation and the impact of that? And also, I want to have a few minutes on looking at the importance of talent, some of the new roles that are coming in. I think there's a link, very much a strong link there. But what's your comments in relation to what Vladimir's just said?
I think actually he's raised a very interesting point. AI is here to stay and is going to have a major impact on the profession in the next few years. The fact that you now don't need to buy your own AI system, but you literally buy in time online to use it, is very interesting, and those small firms who are progressive will adopt that. But it's going to lead to a very interesting scenario in relation to future lawyers and the way in which they're going to practice law. How do you teach a young lawyer to draft if they've been using precedents, and not only using a precedent, but using a precedent which is then run through AI, does all the comparison work, and then produces a near down final draft. Because the way in which we've learned our trade as lawyers is by going through the various steps, and those are going to be removed. So the way in which lawyers are trained is going to need to change, the way in which they understand technology, and where they can challenge it. It's interesting that a number of firms are now including coding in their training programs. Real significant change there. So lawyers are going to have to recognize, especially solicitors, there are a number of non-solicitor providers of legal services. They are probably more open to using technology than lawyers who are traditionally fairly Luddite. So major changes ahead. I don't think we're going to see any rule changes during the pandemic stage, because you're going to need to get lawyers round a table who are partners, who are then prepared to put the financial muscle down there.
It's a huge issue, isn't it? Nathan, what's your perspective on Jonathan's comments there?
Yes, there's no doubt it will change things. I very much don't believe it's going to have anywhere near the sort of impact that has been touted certainly a year ago. I think it's certainly gone through the bell curve, and we're now in a much more sensible place in terms of its impact. What really matters here is not how intelligent these systems are, but how capable they are, as in how can we apply them to the kind of problems that we have, and that takes time. And that's the idea that this is going to transform in and of itself. The concept of artificial intelligence is going to transform the legal profession, I don't think is the case, certainly not in the short term. But it's another great tool that we can use, and has some very specific use cases that can really transform the way in which we undertake that particular aspect of legal service delivery. It also opens up some really interesting ideas about creating entirely new services associated with actually mining the data that we hold, and on behalf of our clients. And that's actually much more interesting, because so much of the data we hold actually sits in documents. It's very unstructured, and you can arguably useless. But actually, if we convert that data into a much more structured data sitting in databases, then that's eminently more valuable. And that's where AI, certainly where we've got some very large data sets, could start really providing some fascinating insight into the businesses of our clients through the data that we hold for them. And so I think that's really fascinating. How can we leverage those technologies to have that kind of discussion and relationship with our client to make those clients stickier?
Which then opens up, it seems to me, a very interesting area, which is the new talent and new career and roles that are coming through. I mean, what's most in demand? Kerry, what's your perspective? I mean, is it data analysts? Is everybody, all the big firms, or all firms, looking to hire data analysts in the way that they, a few years ago, they might have been looking to hire private equity lawyers?
Yeah, I think different firms are on different parts of their journey for that, and looking at different types of roles. So you'll see some really focusing on the data, and it's a huge piece that we're looking at. What does seem to be really in demand is somebody with legal skills and an understanding of technology as well. And people ask why, and should lawyers code? And I don't believe lawyers should code, although if you want to learn that on the side, then fine. But it's the ability to take what is a legal process and understanding some of it, and therefore looking at how the technology can apply to it. And that almost, we talked about it sometimes as an adapter in the middle, being able to take the requirements from a legal process and the ability of technology and bringing that together is quite a key skill. And they're coming from both sides. You're getting lawyers who are learning technology and looking at how to apply it, and you're having IT professionals who are having a bit more of an understanding of that legal process. But we're definitely finding the ability to understand both worlds, maybe not at the in-depth level that you would be if you were a lawyer or an IT professional, but being able to bring that all together are the key skills that we're definitely seeing at the moment that are needed.
So that's the kind of the gold standard, is it? That's or the gold dust. That's what everybody is looking for.
Yeah, very much so.
Jonathan, looks like you want to come in.
Yeah, I'll switch the camera off. I'd also make the observation that technology is enabling the consumer and the client to do a lot of legal research themselves. So lawyers are going to need to recognize that things they've been able to sell in the past they're not going to be able to sell. They're going to have to sell better services, and services which are far more in depth and are far more rounded, so that a number of commercial lawyers will be turning themselves more into business management consultants than into just providers of legal solutions.
Thanks, Jonathan. Okay, well, look, we have about 10 minutes left. And as I said earlier, we have loads of questions, which is brilliant. Thank you, everybody, for submitting questions. I'm going to try and get through as many as we possibly can. Unless it's obvious who this is aimed for, I'm going to just throw this out to the panel, and you can pick it up, whoever would like to pick it up first. So let me go to a first question. What is the biggest adaptation that firms are seeing as a result of COVID-19? Is it the greater use of video conferencing, or is there a greater use of collaborative technology that allows parties to work jointly on documents in real time? We have kind of touched on that, but who'd like to just give us 20 or 30 seconds on that?
Yeah, I will. So without a doubt, it's been video and audio conferencing tools. I mean, that's the fact is we spend our days sitting in front of our computers talking to people. So that's clearly been the most significant change. But that has offered great opportunities to feed into other forms of change. So I would say following on the back of that has been, we use Teams as our default platform. We're a Microsoft house from a strategic perspective. So we've used Teams, and what that's done is that's then fed through to the question of, okay, so we have this platform, that's great. We're using it to share documents online in real time through Teams. But actually, how can we take that one step further and use the collaboration elements of Teams to then have a much more permanent collaboration space? So the use of Teams and the video conferencing platforms has actually fed that, almost been a pipeline of change. And obviously the fact that people have been using that in their personal lives, you've heard of people say that their parent teachers association for their kids' schools, they're using Teams as a way of managing their own activities. And obviously, Microsoft's advertising on terrestrial television has helped enormously, publish the capabilities of these platforms as well.
Interesting. So I kind of facilitated to the future without getting too sci-fi on it, but that's interesting. And actually, it neatly leads into the next question. Jonathan mentioned virtual law firms. Following up on that, do you think virtual law firms will become a thing of the future, Jonathan?
I think they're already here, but
they are indeed. Yeah.
As a result of the pandemic, there are going to be a number of lawyers who now actually are quite comfortable working from home and feel far more empowered, being self-sufficient and joining virtual law firms who are members of current established firms.
Well, that actually does lead very neatly again into the next question. Looking to the future, does the panel think that clients will exploit collaborative technology to pick and select lawyers from different firms to meet their needs for a transaction, so for a single transaction, rather than appointing a single law firm? So, for example, a corporate lawyer from OC with a commercial lawyer from AG and an employment lawyer from Dentons or wherever. And if so, what's the panel's view on the effect on law firms? Kerry, come to you on that.
So I mean, it doesn't go down at the moment to single lawyers from those firms, and it's probably not technology driving it, but collaboration is a really big thing that's been happening for a while. So we will work with other firms where they bring some specialist expertise and we bring others. Maybe that will grow. I'm not sure the technology will push it. It's more that different law firms might be pushing different skills at different times. So I would say it's probably happening, not on a singular level like that, but there's definitely that law firm collaboration is something that goes on anyway.
Okay, thank you. And this question is also to you, Kerry. Question for Kerry: are fee earners making amendments to documents directly themselves now, rather than giving the comments to their PAs to do, which they were able to do in an office environment before working from home? And do you see this task becoming obsolete for PAs going forward after the working from home dynamic?
So we're definitely seeing people using online tools more than printing out and handing them over. We're a firm where our PAs, we have a word processing unit to do that rather than our PAs. So I think that they were always almost a virtual piece rather than your PA sitting next to you. So I think that's still being used quite a bit. Obviously, our PA role is changing because they would spend a lot of time thinking about where you were going to be on a particular day. So all over the country, where you would be in certain meetings and organising your diaries and your travel like that, that's definitely changed. But I think it means that you could use PAs for more things in the same way we talk about lawyers and using tools to help lawyers do work to free up their time to do more strategic work. Can your PAs therefore help you with business development things and more things like that, which I think maybe that will change the role slightly.
Thanks, Kerry. This is definitely for the whole panel, but I'm going to go to Vladimir for at least a start. Where do you think the working from home versus working from office balance will end up in the legal sector for major firms post COVID-19?
Well, I think people are eager to go back to the office really and to kind of socialize a bit more. So I think certainly when things normalize, we'll probably see a bit of a rise in kind of going back to the office and catching up with people. But as we kind of touched upon this, these changes are quite fundamental. So I think the use of time and how we spend that in some cases commuting and things like that will be under review. So I do think that working from home is here to stay. So I think a number from the survey, 49% of legal professionals were allowed to work from home previously. I think that number will definitely grow in the future. Absolutely.
Anyone else want to chip in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to drop in on that. So I think absolutely we're going to see an increase in home working, but I think it will be a strategic differentiator for firms that can actually choose now to use this as to say we are going to be a virtual law firm, and that will attract a certain set of employees that want to operate that way, and also clients that want to be serviced in that way. So from an Osborne Clarke perspective, that wouldn't play well to how we all want to operate as a business. We see, culture is a very critical aspect to our business, especially for firms being around for 270 odd years. So, and we see the physical space of the office as being a very important way of not just communicating that culture to new people joining our business, but also evolving. The cultures aren't static; they change. And the most effective way of doing it is to have a physical space within which people can congregate and choose to evolve that culture in a very organic fashion. So for us, the office will remain a significant part of our business, but its purpose will change. There's no doubt about that. And the idea of going into the office simply to sit at a desk for 7 hours or 8 or 9, depending on how busy things are, that's I think a thing of the past. The purpose of going to the office is to engage with your colleagues, to engage with your clients, and so that's for another discussion another day. But exactly what then the office looks like and how you reconfigure and redefine the office is going to be really important for those organisations that take that strategic approach of retaining their office space.
I think Nathan's picked up on a very important point there, which was glue, which is that the whole culture of a firm is based on people, and people need to talk to their colleagues on an ongoing basis. And I don't think you're going to be able to develop a business very successfully by being totally virtual. I mean, even virtual law firms have centres. So I think firms will want their fee earners to go in. Fee earners are going to want to go in. It's part of the learning process. It's part of the collaborative process. And there are lots of the cliche, what gets talked about around the water cooler. So it's going to still be important to have a practical, an actual office. People will be going into it on a regular basis, but you won't feel guilty if you're working from home.
And I was going to just jump in as well. I think it raises big questions about location and where people are from and what office they officially work in. So especially if you think about London weighting of salaries and things, actually, how is that all going to play out if you're going in the office 1 or 2 days a week and you don't mind doing a slightly longer commute because you're only doing it 1 or 2 days a week, and actually you live in Birmingham and travel to London, or you live in central London? What is that going to mean for salaries almost, and just how offices work?
Thanks very much. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's some very big issues, and equally some issues we didn't even get to. Thank you everybody for submitting questions. There was a question here about the increase in cyber risk, and we didn't really touch on that at all. So that might be another topic for another day. But we are out of time. Really only leaves me to say thank you very much indeed to our excellent panel. It was a really interesting discussion. Thank you to you for tuning in and watching that, and I hope you found that useful. As I say, you can download the whole session again once you get the link through and watch that at your leisure. Thank you very much again. We are about out of time, and look forward to seeing you at the next event. Cheers. Bye-bye.